Preseason game number 1. The New York Football Giants, the New England Patriots. What are we watching for from a high level and deep down? Key players that we want to see on both sides of the ball, and just getting that initial sample size. How is the offseason really going? We break it down next. Hey, it's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, of course, where we are your host. Here, Adam Armbrecht, there, Andrew Makowitz. No need for the extra curriculars around what we do because it is preseason game number 1. Andy, as we said at the top, want to dive right in, talk about the matchup, what the Patriots have done coming in, and where we set our barometer for expectations as we try to get a sample size of where this team, the New York Football Giants, truly stand.
It's finally upon us. Preseason game number 1, Giants versus Patriots Thursday night. If you think about it, the Patriots were a playoff team, so this is a good starting point for the Giants. The Patriots were 10-7 last year, made the playoffs. They were top 10 in points scored per game at 27 points a game, which is about, I don't know, a touchdown and a field goal more than the Giants were scoring every game. This team can manufacture points, and it starts with Bill Belichick being a smart guy, understanding matchups and utilizing them correctly.
Yeah, some of what we're going to obviously is going to see some familiar faces on a lot of levels here, coaching staff wise, player wise. But you mentioned it there. I'll throw in quickly before we dive in on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, and a couple of players that we'll be monitoring here. Got to remember, it's a rookie quarterback last year. We think that Mac Jones has taken some real leaps forward, but still a guy who threw 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 67% completion percentage, and 3,800 yards, 7.3 yards per average, and quite frankly, per attempt. That's the first little tidbit there of, remember, rookie quarterback, and we're still trying to set that bar of expectations for Daniel Jones. But let's talk offense first, Andy. Break it down for us and where we're headed.
Well, before I go into that really quick, Adam, I just wanted to say, while the team was 10-7, there were some different changes, faces in different places for the New England Patriots.
Of course, yeah.
You know, they're going to be a little bit different than what they were last year. They lost their number 1 cornerback, J.C. Jackson, a guy that went out to the West Coast to play for the Chargers, I believe. He was their be-all, end-all lockdown corner. He's not going to be there anymore. Kyle Van Noy kind of went with him. So, they traded away Shaq Mason, their right guard. And then they had a couple of puzzling things, like they took Cole Strange in the first round, who is a guard who we liked, but they took him, 2 rounds earlier than anyone even thought that he could go, especially at the guard position. Sure. And then obviously they brought in someone like Devontae Parker to shore up the wide receiver room, which is kind of devoid of talent there for the Pats. But really, what Giant fans care about is they picked up one, Jabril Peppers. He is going to be playing safety for them, came in on a couple $1 million 1-year kind of prove-it deal. And, oh, by the way, they have our former head coach, Joe Judge, now working with the offense. So there will be some familiar faces out there for Giant fans.
Yeah, for sure. And you just mentioned there, Devontae Parker, they jettisoned N'Keal Harry to the Chicago Bears. So they swapped out what was a broken component in their wide receiving core the last couple of years for them. Brought in, you think, if healthy, a very talented wide receiver from in the division to bolster that. And then you even mentioned inside of the draft, remember, they went and got Marcus Jones from Houston there, cornerback. They went 3rd and 4th round selections at the cornerback position. So, yes, you lose talent, but if there's one thing we know about the Patriots is they draft well. They find the talent pool. And even though you mentioned that high and well regarded as a reach, listen, we had one of those in our draft class as well with Azudu maybe. So you don't want to split too many hairs here, but there is going to be turnover, to your point, for this roster from a free agency standpoint and from a draft class standpoint. But it is always Bill Belichick at the top. They have no coordinators listed. It's all Bill all the time as we start to think about what this team can do against the Giants ultimately on Thursday.
Yeah, and when we think about the particular matchups, let's start, Adam, with the offensive side for the Giants against the defensive front and defensive side of the ball for the Pats. They've always been a very good defensive team. There's no getting around it. But, Adam, I think there's an interesting stat. This is actually a really, really good matchup for the Giants to have for the first preseason game. And I'll give you a couple details. 1, you're going up against a playoff team. 2, you're going up against a very, very respectable and reputable head coach. So if the Giants look good against the Patriots, it's a win for them. The second piece of it is the Giants were last in the league in total sacks in 2021 with 34. We obviously knew we needed to get more pass rush. That's why we went out and got someone like Kayvon Thibodeau with a first-round draft pick. But many people don't realize that the Patriots were, tied for, 28th or 29th in total sacks. They only had 2 more sacks than the Giants in total. They are not a team that pins their ears back and gets to the quarterback. And Adam, I think that's noteworthy because we talk about the offensive line struggles. We talk about Daniel Jones not having enough time to throw. It feels like in his limited snaps that he's going to be out there. That's not really the concern that we have. The concern is going to be accuracy, route running, and completions rather than worrying if Daniel Jones is going to be on his back consistently.
Yeah, and it's funny too, just you mentioned that idea of what the Patriots maybe don't do well defensively versus what the Giants are going to be capable of. And you also mentioned the limited snaps, right? So just to put this into context, we're going to come back in after the game and talk about takeaways, but we understand, we may only get 7 to 10 reps of the best versus the best, but you can still go down the line there when you get into your second team and your third team and say, did we still look better though? Did guys look better? On an individual level, it's funny. You mentioned that the Patriots didn't do a good job getting pressure on the quarterback, but I actually look at specifically, and I'll talk about the wide receiving core too, I think, but John Feliciano, like we've talked about the offensive line a lot. I feel like a lot of people do know what Shane Lemieux is, missed time with the injury, but there's a baseline there. You're talking about a guy in John Feliciano who so far has missed time due to heat exhaustion, is punching dudes in the helmet, which I just, again, is always a red flag for me because it's just stupid, and is converting over from guard to center. There are real questions there. So against the defensive front that maybe is not going to be bringing the heat, I want to see John Feliciano really dominate because we need to check that box. If we think the bookends are there and we feel comfortable with Glowinski, and again, we feel comfortable at least right now with Shane Lemieux, John Feliciano and the point of attack, the guy that gets the ball to Daniel Jones is someone that however many reps he gets, I want to see 80% of those look strong. Because if it's anything less than that, it's not end of the world, but I'm immediately going to go, okay, how do you look in practice? And how do you look in preseason game number 2 and game number 3? Because that's a big box to check.
Yeah, he is a very important piece of this because of all the things you mentioned. It's not just him switching one position. It's all of the things combined is cumulative to make him be very important.
Protection assignments, right? He's communicating to the entire offensive line what needs to happen on a pre-snap basis.
Of course. And obviously it's going to be important to see how Evan Neal and Glowinski gel. There's a million storylines that we could check the box and talk about, but I think Feliciano is an important one. One small other one that I'll give you, which probably is not as relevant for other people. I'm curious to see Gary Brightwell out there because he is listed as the 3rd string running back. We're pretty sure that it's going to be Saquon Barkley and Matt Breida as the 1-2. It feels like with Antonio Williams, Jayshon Corbin, Gary Brightwell, they're going to get opportunities to run the ball more than Saquon will. Who is going to take that 3rd running back's position? The preseason is all about showing up and showing out in that regard.
Yeah, and one last note I think we can say, because you talked about having time, Daniel Jones looking crisp, making the right throws. The wide receiver group is going to be fun to watch because we don't think we'll see a ton of Kadarius Toney, who was getting some treatment, managing the knee there, obviously. So he may not be out there at all. Won't be shocked. Wandale Robinson, the rookie. Yeah, reps, but again, he's already kind of established himself here. Kenny Gallaudet, kind of the same thing. So now it's everybody else. It's Darius Slayton, it's CJ Board, it's Richie James, it's David Sills, it's Colin Johnson. It's all of the others and maybe trying to put a good foot forward and showcase who else can fill out this wide receiver core because there's still needs there from a depth perspective.
Yeah, I love that. Obviously, we need to see what Kenny Gallaudet has. Can he get a little bit of separation? Are they going to feed him the ball a little bit? Is Darius Slayton running with the 2s or the 3s again? Like, that's going to be a whole host of storylines to look across the wide receiver room. Fascinating because it feels like there's so many variables there that, like, week 1, it could look drastically different than what it looks like in this preseason game.
Let's talk about the let's flip the script, right? Offense versus defense. Now, defense versus offense set the table once again with what the Patriots are coming in the door with. And then we'll talk about it a little bit deeper down where we think the Giants should try to have some success.
So I actually think this side of the matchup is not being talked about enough because of the Giants' offensive struggles in camp. Everyone continues to talk about the Giants not being able to move the ball. Is Daniel Jones the guy? Yes or no? We have a whole new defensive coordinator, defensive scheme. We used our top draft pick on a defensive edge rusher. We're going blitz heavy as opposed to drop back cover 2 with Patrick Graham. The whole situation is going to be different for the Giants. And one key stat that I look at as we go into this is that the New England Patriots love to run the football. Yes, they run it by committee. They usually have 2, 3, 4 guys that they throw at you, but they were 8th in the league in rushing last year. They like to establish the run, which puts their young quarterback, or Tom Brady previously, in second and shorts, third and short situations where it's more manageable to complete things. What I'm thinking about right out of the gate is how will that defensive line, that defensive front for the Giants of, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and whomever they decide to put out there next to him in a rotation, are they able to stop the run to make sure that the secondary isn't going to have to do more than what it's capable of early on?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, we all know that the Patriots run a rotation when it comes to the running backs. And it's something that I think even beyond the initial wave of starters, you're going to be able to take a look at. And you mentioned about stuff in the run. Remember last year, and again, it's always a mixed bag about how bad was the offense and the pressure it put on the defense. But the defensive front for, being known for, well, with Dexter Lawrence and with Leonard Williams, we're going to shut down that run and then we'll figure it out. Now, Danny Shelton was a bit of a swing and a miss there. And the GM was doing all kinds of wacky stuff throughout the season, stripping some parts. But they weren't great at it, right? They got pushed around a little bit in the trenches. So specifically inside the defensive front, we know when we talked about the nose tackle spot, Justin Ellis is ahead of DJ Davidson. I'm going to watch for DJ Davidson because he's going to get some run here with these reps, and certainly an opportunity to see, hey, how are you progressing along inside of this camp? And do we think we have that nice wave after wave mentality, talking so much about edge rush and bringing pressure, but the interior matters because you need to be able to do it across the board there. So I'm specifically looking at DJ Davidson a little bit. I have another that goes away from the running back group here, but is there a player that you specifically want to watch here? And by the way, a guy on the Patriots side of things, right? I think Mac Jones, just from a high level NFL, it's going to be interesting to watch his reps just to see how he's progressing in year number 2, has gone through a real body transformation from one season to the next.
Keep in mind, the Giants were not great against the run last year. They were 25th in the league in run yard defense per game. So they were towards the back half. I think they gave over 125 yards rushing. That's a bad matchup for this Giants defense because the Patriots love to run the ball. The Giants couldn't stop the run last year. Not very successful. What that's going to do is allow the play action for Mac Jones to get him in more comfortable situations where the Giants can't just sit back and say, oh, it's 3rd and 9. We know Mac has to throw the ball. That puts the spotlight to me directly on Aaron Robinson. Because we're talking about...
I should have said it. That's my guy. I mentioned Davidson on the line because I wanted to stay on theme with you about run defense, but this is the guy that I watch for however many reps he gets. Please go.
You circle him up. You and I are on the same page. We specifically didn't talk about the player that we wanted to highlight because we wanted to have this back and forth. But you and I both think we have Adoree Jackson. We know where he is. We see Radarius Williams listed as the backup to Aaron Robinson and Adoree Jackson. He's hurt. We're not going to maybe see as many reps from him. I'm circling Aaron Robinson and saying, can you be a number 2 cornerback on the outside guarding a guy like Devontae Parker? Can you take that challenge on? Have you matured? Have you grown enough to be able to handle that task? And it's going to be on the defensive line to put them in positions where they know they're going to pass rather than play action where Aaron Robinson has to guard against everything. But Adam, I think you and I are on the same wavelength. He is a guy where if he can establish himself, it makes a lot less question marks across the defensive secondary.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday about Radarius Williams, and as he's comes back from the injury, and maybe it alleviates the strain of the organization. I feel like they have to go out to the market and bring in a veteran at some point. But again, could be 7 reps, could be 12 reps, whatever it is for Aaron Robinson. I want them to look crisp. I want them to look clean. I want him to be blanketed on whatever assignment he gets, right? I want to have that confidence of, okay, first preseason game, limited set of reps here. Looks strong, looks confident. And that's what you've heard from training camp. You've heard that he looks the part. He's been working well. He's progressing along. So everything about his game, his speed, his size, it all lends itself to say that this guy is ready to be the number 2. I just don't want, listen, can't have him go out there and be like over, the first 5 snaps for the Patriots offense, they picked on Aaron Robinson 3 out of 5 for completions. Would it tell me that Aaron Robinson can't be the number 2? No, but it would also make me go, okay, we got a week of practices and then preseason game number 2 before you start to really push that button. And I'll even extend it out here, and I'll let you jump in. You mentioned Radarius Williams. When we talk about the volume of snaps, and this maybe we can pull it globally here just for the game overall in the Giants, because you know you're going to get into the depth chart and you're going to get into some of these backup reps. I do look at Cordell Flott. I do look at Zion Gilbert. I do look at Darren Evans, right? I do look at Yusuf Corker without Dane Belton being out there. I think the rep volume is going to be really fun for all these other guys that aren't listed first or sometimes second on the depth chart. And this is where it gets exciting, just to give me the taste of what these young players can do. And if any of them show a little something, again, it bolsters your confidence about position depth.
Yeah, and you know, not to overlook the linebacking position, Adam, which we know is kind of in flux for the Giants. But you know, obviously we've seen what Tate Crowder can do. We've seen what Blake Martinez can do when healthy. You got to look at Micah McFadden and Darian Beavers and say, you guys are going to get at least the second quarter and the third quarter worth of reps out there. And then you got guys like Cam Brown and Carter Coughlin who will spell them probably later in the game. But Darian Beavers has looked like a mountain of a man in training camp. There's all these talks about how he's a thumper. He you know, when he makes contact, he doesn't go backwards. He goes forwards when he makes contact. I want to see him out there, especially against the Patriots run game, even if it's their second string. I want to see him dominating, getting through the line of scrimmage and being able to make some tackles in the backfield. I think he is a guy that could really do himself, a favor and get himself some meaningful snaps early on if he shows out in preseason.
Yeah, and we had talked about him over the last couple of days too. So again, when we think about this game, we know the guys that are at the top. So we're not in the post game. We'll talk about Daniel Bellinger and how he looked. We'll talk about Evan Neal, as you mentioned at the top. We'll talk about Andrew Thomas, Thibodeau,
Wandale Robinson.
Wandale, he's a rookie, but we know he's plugged in there, right? All these we know we're getting a sample size on them. So now just when we think about it at the end of the day, we'll call it. Who are the players that we're watching for here? We're watching, yes, a starter in Aaron Robinson. We're kind of watching that secondary group. Darian Beavers is going to get big reps. I think Joshua Ezeudu is another big name to watch when he's going to be getting reps as that backup at the left tackle and left guard position. We're going a little bit of depth piece here. You mentioned Gary Brightwell there as well. And I mentioned John Feliciano. So, 6 guys that you want to drill down on. Some of the sexy names and what guess what? We're going to talk about Daniel Jones, right? Like we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about all the high level guys, but ultimately this is about that first sample size for some of the young talent and backup talent to tell us where are we in terms of these position battles that we're going to watch over the rest of August.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind the Giants had so many injuries to a lot of their big positional players last season. We need to know who can come in, step in and fill in admirably. And that's why these second and third string guys, the second and third quarters, usually are where people turn the TV screen off at them. But at the end of the day, that's where the Giants will show that they have depth. And you and I will be tuning in until the last snap. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit afterwards about it.
You better believe it, buddy. We'll break down what we saw. We'll see where are we in the old barometer of confidence in the New York Football Giants. Preseason game number 1, Thursday night, New England Patriots. We'll see some handshakes. Maybe a couple players will meet there in the pregame and shake some nods and tickle some babies and kiss some ladies. However those phrases go, we'll break it all down. You get us on YouTube. You get us on the podcast feed. And as always, ahead of preseason game number 1, Andrew Makowitz wants, needs, and demands the people.
As always, let's go Big Blue.